My parents abandoned me at a remote campsite with a note saying, "Find your own way home." I never went back. 10 years later, they came begging for $150,000, and my response left them speechless. Wow, so here's the scoop. When I was 18, my parents literally left me stranded at this empty campsite. No joke, they drove off and left me there with zero food, no water, and just a quick note that said, "Find your way home, this is your lesson." They thought it was some kind of tough love strategy to make me grow up. But honestly, that was the day I decided I was done with them for good. Hey, I'm Brian. I'm 30 now, and I run a survival skills training company. Sounds a bit wild, right? But given how I grew up, it's not really a shock. My folks were all about raising kids by making them tough. From early on, I had to be independent in ways no kid should experience. No help, no comfort, just endless life lessons they'd say were prep for the future. And then when I hit 18, they majorly crossed a line. That day was when I finally saw that my family wasn't really my home, and it was time to leave them behind forever. So picture it. It's a blazing hot summer afternoon. The sun's beating down, and cicadas are the only noise out there in the quiet wilderness. My parents, Richard and Diane, picked this remote spot for a family camping trip, which was a rare thing for us. My sister Emily and I were just sitting there with our bags, looking around at the empty campsite. There were no other people, no families having fun, just us surrounded by untouched nature. I couldn't even remember the last family trip we had. After setting up camp, we had a simple lunch, just cold sandwiches and bottled water. The whole trip seemed normal, but something felt off. My parents were too chill, acting weirdly nice, with none of the usual nagging. My dad told me to go collect firewood, which isn't out of the ordinary. The way he said it sure was. My mom chimed in, all gentle, which threw me off even more. I couldn't say no. I walked into the woods thinking I'd be back in 15 minutes, but finding firewood was trickier than I thought. I kept feeling this weird sense of unease but brushed it off. After about half an hour, I came back and everything was gone. No tent, no car, no family, nothing. Just a piece of paper that said, "Find your way home, this is your lesson." At first, it seemed like a bad joke, but it hit me that they really left. Panic settled in when I tried to call my mom, but there was barely any signal. I managed to get through to her eventually, and she acted like this was all part of some plan for me. I was furious. She just told me to find my own way back. The call cut off, and I knew they weren't coming back. I needed to get out of there before dark hit, so I started walking, hoping to get a signal to call for help. After a bit of a hike, my phone finally got enough bars, and I dialed 911. It felt like forever, but eventually I got through. They asked for my location, and I did my best to explain where I was. I wasn't hurt, just stranded without food or water, and the sun was going down. They sent a team to find me and told me to stay put. Waiting there was nerve-wracking, but I knew I was waiting for something more than just a ride back to town. I was waiting for a new beginning, a life without them. Finally, after what felt like ages, I heard a car approaching. It was my ticket to a fresh start. Two officers got out of their patrol car, both wearing uniforms with the county sheriff's department emblem. One of them was a rugged-looking guy in his 40s, and the other looked like he was just starting out, probably a rookie. The older officer, Brian Miller, assessed the scene with sharp eyes. "Is that you?" he asked. I was still tense but tried to keep it together. "Yeah, that's me." He checked me over and asked, "Are you hurt?" I shook my head. "I'm good, but my parents ditched me here." The younger cop looked surprised. "Ditched you?" he repeated, clearly taken aback. I was gripping my phone so hard it could have snapped. "Yeah," I nodded. They drove off and left a note saying I should find my way back. This isn't their first stunt like this. The two officers exchanged a knowing look. The older one then said, "Okay, we're taking you to the station. You can call someone from there and we'll get in touch with your parents." Half an hour later, I was sitting at the police station staring at a steaming mug of coffee. The place was dead silent. I wasn't supposed to be here, but thanks to my parents, I was. First thing I did was call Uncle Jack, the only family member who ever criticized my parents' idea of parenting. Meanwhile, an officer was on the phone with my parents. About 2 hours later, my parents showed up. Richard and Diane walked in looking more annoyed than worried. They didn't seem to care that their kid was left in the woods alone. Uncle Jack came in right after them, looking like he was ready to blow up. The officer behind the desk kept calm and asked, "Are you Brian Miller's parents?" My dad crossed his arms and nodded. "Yeah, what's the issue?" The officer referred to his notes and replied, "The issue is your son called 911 after being left alone in the woods. You drove off without telling him. Is that true?" My mom huffed, obviously annoyed. "Yeah, that's true. But he's 18. It's not abandonment. It's a life lesson." That hit me hard. I balled up my fists under the table to stay cool. The officer tilted his head and said, "You do know your actions might be considered abandonment, right? He had no way to get out, no food, no water." My dad just shrugged. "He's not a kid. He can handle himself. We didn't do anything wrong." Uncle Jack, who had been biding his time, finally exploded. "Nothing wrong? You left him stranded in the woods. Do you even know what boundaries are?" My mom shot him a glare. "Stay out of it, Jack. It's none of your business." He let out a sarcastic laugh. "Not my business? Do you think parenting means abandoning your kid in the wilderness and telling him to survive? This isn't a military drill." My dad shrugged it off. "He's 18. He can handle it, can't he?" The officer leaned forward, his hands clasped. "You're right about one thing, Richard. Brian is 18, which means you don't get to make decisions for him anymore." The room went silent. My parents looked taken aback like they hadn't seen this coming. Uncle Jack turned to me, softer now. "Brian, you can come stay with me. You don't have to go through this anymore." I looked him in the eye and felt a glimpse of safety for the first time that day. Just as I was about to answer, my mom shrieked, "No! He's our son! He's coming home with us!" The officer turned to her, voice firm. "No, Diane. As you just said, Brian is 18. The choice is his." After the officer's final words, I stood up silently and headed for Uncle Jack's car, not needing to look back but doing it anyway. My parents stood frozen, maybe finally realizing they couldn't control me forever. Uncle Jack followed, giving me a reassuring pat on the shoulder. I looked back and spoke calmly but sharply. "Consider me gone the second you left me in those woods." My mom's mouth hung open, no words coming out. My dad stood like a statue, but I knew he was shaken. I turned away, nothing left to say or hold me back. That night, sleep was impossible. Uncle Jack's house was quiet, but memories kept playing in my head like an old movie. I remembered being 10 when my mom left me at a supermarket. One second I was holding her hand, the next she was gone. When I finally found her, crying and scared, she just crossed her arms and said, "You found your way, right?" No hug, no sorry, just cold indifference. At 12, when I asked Emily for homework help and got caught, my dad yelled, "If you can't do it alone, you deserve to fail." I was forced to study until 2 a.m. without any guidance. Emily got punished for helping too. At 16, even with a fever, my mom refused to let me stay home from school. She said, "Life doesn't stop just because you're not feeling well." I ended up collapsing at school, only for her to get mad at me for disrupting her workday. Now at 18, they've left me again. Exhausted, I finally drifted off to sleep. The next morning, there was loud knocking at Uncle Jack's door. My parents were there, more annoyed than worried. My dad's voice rang out, "Jack, open up! We need to talk to Brian." Uncle Jack sighed, put down his paper, and looked at me to see if I wanted to deal with them. I just shook my head. He opened the door, ready to stand by whatever decision I made. So, Uncle Jack stood his ground, his voice firm. "He's not interested in seeing you," he said. My mom tried to push her way past him, but he wasn't having any of it. "He's our son. He belongs at home with us," she insisted. Uncle Jack didn't back down. He looked at them with cold eyes, his voice dropping to a lower, more serious tone. "You still have the nerve to call him your son and demand he come home? You left him in the woods and now you expect everything to just go back to how it was?" My dad's brow furrowed. He tried to keep his cool, but you could hear the frustration in his voice. "It was just a lesson, Jack. Brian is making too much of it," he said. Uncle Jack laughed sharply, without any humor, his eyes filled with disgust. "A lesson that could have left your son dead out there in the forest? Come on, Richard." My mom crossed her arms defiantly. "This isn't your business, Jack. Keep out of our family's affairs." Uncle Jack took a deep breath and spoke slowly, making sure each word hit hard. No, Diane. The moment you abandoned Brian and he had to call 911 to save himself, that's when it stopped being just your family's business. Silence followed. My parents didn't have a comeback. Uncle Jack's patience was spent. Anything else? Otherwise leave. They hesitated like they were waiting for something, but eventually my mom turned away, pulling my dad with her. They walked off the porch, got in their car, and drove away. That was the last time I saw them for years. My lasting memory was of them leaving Uncle Jack's house with nothing but their pride and failure. 2 weeks later, an email pinged into my inbox. I'd been accepted into the University of California, Berkeley's business administration program. I blinked a few times, reading it over and over, worried I was seeing things. Once I realized it was real, I put down my phone and took a deep breath, letting the reality sink in before I shared the news with Uncle Jack. He was in the living room, focused on fixing an old radio. When he noticed me, he looked over with a questioning gaze. I got in, I said, more calmly than I felt. Inside, I was buzzing. Uncle Jack didn't say anything at first. He just studied me, then nodded slightly, a hint of pride on his face. Good. Now pack up. I'll help you move into the dorm. No over-the-top congratulations, no tears, no big dramatic hugs like on TV, just a simple acknowledgement and trust. For me, that was enough. The day I moved into my dorm, all I had was a small suitcase and a backpack. I unpacked on my own, taking in the modest yet peaceful room. Gone was the tension of entering a room, the fear of being judged or controlled. But freedom came with its own challenges. Without financial help from my family, I was on my own. I took out a low-interest student loan for tuition and immediately started job hunting. My shift at the campus coffee shop began at 5 a.m. Those first few weeks were rough, standing behind the counter making endless cups of coffee before the sun came up. But somehow, having a busy schedule made me feel more grounded. I'd take the bus back to Uncle Jack's on weekends. His place wasn't far, but just far enough to feel like I was stepping away from the chaos of college life. Uncle Jack welcomed me every time I came home, as if I'd never left. No lectures, no forced lessons, no looks of disappointment, just a warm meal, a cold beer on the table, and conversations where I didn't have to censor myself. We'd sit and chat about football, politics, or random school happenings. And that's when I understood. Family isn't about where you're born, it's about where you feel valued. College wasn't a breeze. Between lectures and part-time jobs to cover my expenses, I spent almost all my free time getting practical skills. After being left in the woods by my parents, I knew I needed to learn how to fend for myself. I devoured survival books, watched wilderness documentaries, and even studied escape techniques for extreme situations. The internet became my go-to resource. I taught myself everything from starting a fire without matches to finding clean water in the wild and signaling for rescue without gadgets. The more I learned, the clearer it became. Most people have no clue what to do in an emergency. One day, while working at the cafe, I overheard a group discussing a hiker who'd gone missing in the woods. He'd been lost for 3 days before being found, barely hanging on. That was my light bulb moment. Why not share what I know to help others? I started small, creating a YouTube channel to share basic survival tips and tricks I'd learned. At first, no one paid much attention, but then one of my videos, How to Survive If You Get Lost in the Woods, blew up. I kept filming simple tutorials on my old phone and uploading them online. People were interested in survival skills. It wasn't just adventurers. Anyone could end up in a tough spot, and knowing what to do could make all the difference. After graduating, I took it further. With some savings from my part-time gigs and a small loan, I launched my own survival training company. It was just me at the start, building the website, running social media ads, organizing in-person courses. I offered basic training like surviving in the wilderness, navigation when disoriented, signaling for help without a phone, and basic first aid without supplies. I didn't just teach theory. I took people into real-life survival situations for hands-on learning. It worked. Within a year, my company started catching attention. Backpackers, hikers, even corporate teams looking for survival-based team building signed up. By year 3, I was expanding, partnering with rescue groups and emergency teams. That's when I realized everything I'd built started the day I was abandoned at the creek campground. They thought they were breaking me, pushing me toward failure. But that moment became the base of my success. I became self-sufficient, just not in the way they intended. Through the years I spent building my career, I never heard from my parents. No calls or texts when I graduated, no curiosity about my job. It was as if I didn't exist, and honestly, I didn't care. I knew they were fine because of Emily. Though I'd cut ties with my parents, my sister and I stayed close. We texted regularly, had the occasional phone call, and met up when we could. Emily wasn't like them. She never agreed with how they treated me, but she couldn't change it. Still, she was a part of my life, the one family member I cared about. I felt okay. I had a career I loved, a life of freedom, and most importantly, I'd stayed far away from my parents. That was enough. At least, that's what I thought. But about a year ago, they pulled me back into their drama, and it all started on what seemed like just another ordinary weekend. So there I was, chilling in my apartment, sipping on a hot cup of coffee while scrolling through the news on my laptop. Just a regular morning, you know? Then, out of nowhere, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and saw a name I hadn't seen in, like, a decade. My mom. I just sat there for a moment, frozen, staring at my phone like it was some kind of relic from my past. 10 years, no calls, no messages, and now they suddenly needed me. Of course, I didn't pick up. Instead, I silenced the phone, took a deep sip of my coffee, and went back to reading. I was curious to see how far they'd go. 5 minutes passed, then 10, 20. They just kept calling. After 40 minutes, the calls finally stopped. I checked my phone, 42 missed calls. I had to laugh. Then a text popped up. "Your father and I are in serious trouble. Please help us, Brian. Call us back ASAP." I just stared at it for a few seconds before deleting it without a second thought. By noon, Emily called. She never hits me up in the middle of the day, so I instantly knew something was up. I answered, and right away her voice was all tense but not shocked. "Brian, are you free? Let's meet at our usual spot." I thought for a second and nodded. "All right, 30 minutes. We met at this cafe we always went to when stuff got serious. Emily was already there, looking lost in thought in our corner seat. I sat down straight to the point. "What's going on?" She looked up, lips pressed together, and started explaining. It was about Mom and Dad. I didn't react, just waited. She took a deep breath and began slowly. They tricked her into handing over money, promising it was for an investment, but in reality, they gambled it away. She paused, her eyes turning darker. I didn't say anything, just watched her, waiting for more. Not only that, they took out a mortgage on the house. Emily's voice dropped, full of anger. She overheard them talking and found out they lost everything. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. "So they screwed themselves over and tried to drag you down with them?" Emily nodded, then said even worse, "Brian, they've been watching you." I frowned. "Watching me?" She nodded again. "They know you're successful, independent, making money. They were waiting till you were rich enough to come for you." I felt irritation creeping in. So this was their plan all along. Con her, then come after me. Emily nodded, saying they wouldn't stop and she had to warn me. The next day they showed up at my company. I half expected it after everything from the day before. Part of me wanted to dodge them. I had a packed day and no patience to deal with them. But then I thought, I've been avoiding this long enough. Time to face it. They walked into my office looking just like I remembered, but this time they weren't in control. My mom forced a smile, eyes trying to seem warm. My dad stayed serious but with impatience in his gaze. "Brian, you look so different. How long has it been?" My mom's voice was fake cheery. I leaned back, arms crossed. 10 years. I smirked. They hesitated but tried to regroup. "How have you been? We've always thought about you." I laughed sharply. "Why are you here?" My dad sighed, leaning forward. "We made some bad investments. The bank's going to take our house. Can you help us with $150,000? I raised an eyebrow, then chuckled. "Bad investments?" I asked, mocking them. "You mean investing in a casino, right? I already know everything." I met their eyes, firm. "Go home. I don't have money to spare, and like I told you before, I died the day you left me in that forest." The room's vibe shifted instantly. Their fake smiles vanished, replaced by anger. My mom crossed her arms, glaring. My dad's voice lost its pleading tone. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't be where you are today. Leaving you made you strong. I looked at him and laughed, not because he was right, but because it was so absurd. A thought hit me. Revenge. I looked at them, my smile calculated. All right, you need $150,000, right? Fine, I'll give you $250,000. $150,000 to save your house, another $100,000 for retirement. How's that? They were stunned. Then my mom, sounding all sweet, said, Brian, I knew you still cared. My dad nodded, looking satisfied, but I continued. With one condition. The room went cold. I will abandon you in the forest. If you find your way out in 3 days, you get the money. Silence. My dad slammed his hand on the desk, furious. You ungrateful little, he snarled. I shrugged. Your choice. I calmly called security to escort them out. They left, enraged, my mom yelling, You will regret this. I didn't respond, just watched them get dragged out. After that, I thought it was done. I'd cut ties once and for all. But I underestimated them. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. I ignored it at first, sticking to my morning routine, coffee, emails, everything. But the calls kept coming, one after another. Then my security guard called, his voice tense. Boss, we got a situation. You might not want to come in today. I paused. Why? He explained, There's a mob of reporters outside, cameras, microphones, the whole shebang. The media's after you. Irritation rose in my chest. What did they do now? Right then, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was my assistant, her voice shaky. Brian, and have you seen the video? Confused, I frowned. What video? I was just watching this video after my friend sent it over, and boy, was it everywhere. I clicked on the link, pressed play, and boom, it hit me. My parents had totally edited the footage from yesterday. There was absolutely nothing about them asking for money, no mention of their gambling issues, or their little scheme to get me involved. And of course, no word about the financial offer I'd made to help them out. What did they leave in? Just a clip of me sitting at my desk, staring at them coldly while saying, I'll abandon you in the forest. I'll give you the money if you survive for 3 days. Yeah, that was it. One out-of-context line that made me look like some heartless jerk looking to ditch his parents out of spite. Underneath the video, the comments section was going nuts. People were shocked. How could anyone treat their parents this way? The internet was basically calling me out as this ungrateful, cruel son who forgot who raised him. My blood ran cold. They actually did this. And my parents went that far. As soon as the video ended, my phone buzzed again. It was Uncle Jack. Brian, you all right? He asked, sounding tense. Yeah, he'd seen it too. I sighed, telling him I could handle it. He knew the video wasn't the real me, but he also got how the media loves to twist things. My parents didn't care about me for a whole decade, but now that they needed cash, they had no problem making me look like the bad guy to get it. If they wanted a fight, I was ready. After chatting with Uncle Jack, I rang up Emily. She picked up after 2 rings, sounding worried. She probably had already seen the mess online. Emily, I need your help, I told her. And without missing a beat, she said, Of course, meet me at your office at 9:30. Even though she couldn't see it, I nodded. I wasn't alone in this. Next up, I called my assistant, who was clearly stressed out. Boss, it's getting worse. The media is all over this, and they want your side of the story. Leaning back in my chair, I told her to invite every journalist to our conference room at 9:30. She hesitated, worried it might backfire, but I was beyond ready. I grabbed my keys and left my place. Today, I'd face it head on. At 9:30 sharp, Emily and I walked into the conference room, packed with reporters, cameras pointed right at us. They were expecting a dramatic showdown, maybe a weak attempt at clearing the air. But I wasn't playing that game. When the questions started flying, I raised a hand to hush them. Instead of explaining, I let the security footage speak for itself. The uncut, unedited recording played on the big screen, showing the truth. When it ended, I faced the reporters, my voice steady. That's the truth, I said. You've seen it. It's online now, so feel free to share it. A heavy silence followed as they processed what just happened. I simply added that even if my parents had accepted Tud, he challenged, I never would have left them stranded. Just an agreement to my terms would have meant 250,000 landed in their lap. But instead, they twisted things to make me look like the villain. Emily stood beside me, her voice a bit shaky but strong. She shared how they had even lied to her, claiming they needed money for an investment when it was really for gambling. She couldn't stay quiet anymore, and the room hung onto every word. The truth was out, and there was no going back. That afternoon, the media did a complete 180. The same outlets that trashed me were now rethinking their stories. Headlines shifted, showing the real ugliness of the situation. As I read some of the coverage, I didn't feel a sense of victory. The truth coming out was all I needed. I blocked my parents' numbers, refusing to let them back in my life, just as they'd cut me out years ago. A year later, life's smoother than ever. Business is booming, and I'm not bothered by any of it anymore. Occasionally, I get news about them, like when Uncle Jack called to say they'd moved away after losing everything. But honestly, I don't really care. They made their choices. So, here's where I ask you guys. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Was I too harsh, or did they just get what they deserved? I'd love to hear your take, so drop a comment below. And if you're into stories like this, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Catch you later.